Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this, our next in our Ask the Expert series of webinars. I think that's probably the wrong word for it, but a Q&A session where we answer your questions. We've had lots of people sending us in questions on our previous subjects, and today is no exception to that. We've got a lot of questions, lots of viewers. So welcome, and thank you for joining us. Today's subject is website planning. It's interesting, it's such a popular subject because it's very close to my heart. And it's something that people talk about doing a lot and very seldom actually get round to doing. And if they do it, it seldom comes out of the filing cabinet that it's been put in, and people just carry on by the seat of their pants, which is not a good thing. As an easy understanding, a simple understanding of website planning will make all the difference between success and failure for your new website. So it's important you understand it, and it's important that you implement it. If you understand it, you will implement it. If you don't really understand what it's about, then it'll just be something you do for the boss, and then it becomes a pain, and you put it back in that bottom drawer and just get on by the seat of your pants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a website project plan that we've drawn up. But by the way, I should say there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So people watching, if you'd like to submit your questions there, and we'll get to them at the end. I'm just going to introduce it, and then we'll go on to the questions. So here we have a website project plan. Now, this is a typical plan sort of thing that we would use. It's not appropriate for every single job that you do, but for, I would say, 9 out of 10, you would probably want to use something very similar to this with most of the same headings down the left-hand side. I won't go through it in painful detail, but you can read it yourselves. There are a number of the first sort of half dozen are really kind of strategic questions that you need to be clarifying. Asking yourself and clarifying before you even begin to work on your website. And then we get on to things like wireframing and site structure, SEO, and you don't really get onto the design of it until you've done all of these things. And very often people will put the cart before the horse and design it first, and then start trying to fit things into it. And that is a recipe for disaster, and I don't recommend that at all. It's not that design is in itself wrong, but how can it be right if you don't know what you're designing for, and what your objectives are, and what your strategy is, and what your positioning and messages are, and what the functionality required, and so on. You have to go through this staged process in order to then be able to design a website which is going to work for you and which will create success. And without that, you might as well not get out of bed in the morning.
Mark, why do you think a lot of people skip sort of the first steps of this plan?
Because they're in a rush. We come across this all the time. So you'll have a marketing manager or a CEO, if it's an SME, who will have built their website in their mind over the preceding 6 months or year. And they'll have seen their competitors' websites, and they'll think they're all wonderful and theirs is failing because that's the nature of things. So they've got it all in their head, and they just want to get on with it, and they want to have somebody design it, make it look pretty, and then miraculously it will all happen. Yeah. Sadly, it doesn't work like that. I'm sure I don't need to tell you, most of the people watching today, I suspect, have done this a few times, and they know what can go wrong and how you can end up with a website which only partially fulfills the brief and gets to your objectives, which is probably why they're redesigning their website now. So you have to go through a staged process. If you don't, you can almost guarantee it will be a failure. In 2 years' time, you'll be back on the drawing board designing it yet again, and spending all that money which you could have much more beneficially spent on advertising or some kind of promotion. So that's the background to it. And it's very important, as I say, that you understand what needs to be done, the steps you need to go through to get to the perfect website, the successful website. If you don't understand it, then it's difficult to make a success of it. Now, I think Gil's been waving at me. There's little questions popping in. So I think without further ado, we should go ahead with questions. Just to remind you, there is a Q&A button at the bottom, so please post your question there. I haven't seen if there's any there yet, but I think there are, aren't there, Gil? What's our first
Yeah, so you got one question here first from Paul, who works in the SATCOM industry. He said, our website has a complex mix of products and services. How should we organize it for best results? So I'd say this is partly a strategic question and partly sort of a site structure or design or functionality. So perhaps, Ben, do you want to answer this?
Okay, hi, thanks, Gil. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Paul, for the question. In SATCOMs, yeah, I can understand that we've a few clients ourselves that deal with that technology, and often can be a heavy mix of product and service level offering. And as Mark said before, jumping in the design too early, and this is a good case in point, really, is a mistake. Everyone's obviously considers themselves a designer, interior designer, or otherwise everyone likes to feel they have a visual flair or have a creative response to the things that they see. So it's not unusual for people wanting to jump in at that point. But as we saw from the plan that Mark shared, from our perspective anyway, a fully prepped and built website from the ground up, at least half of the time requirement really constitutes, or half of the items that need addressing at least constitutes half the plan of the project, right up to the point really that you're creating content and building content for it. Now, in terms of getting that mix between products and services, you need a strong site structure at the outset, one that's planned end to end and approved by all stakeholders. So at that point, you're really getting to understand the full mix of content types that you're likely to have. In our experience, generally a product is a product is a product, and it's difficult to then mix a product relationship across different verticals of your website, whether it's via industries or services. So you need really to be able to, at the point you've got a site structure, draw up the relationships between different content types. So you need to be able to, that interrelationship between content is very important. It's also important for SEO. So in terms of user journeys through your site, you want to be able to make sure that if someone lands on a product page, that they've come to an optimized page that's working powerfully for you on the search engines, but they can easily, quickly relate to the journeys through the site that relate to them, whether it's for their industry or whether it's to the services they might be interested in. And that's the same for an expected arrival at, say, a service level page or an industry level page. So these are the considerations you need, and a site structure leading on to a user journey map or a site diagram will help you to draw those relationships together.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out that without a strategy, you don't really know what that mix should be. And SATCOM's no different to any other tech industry, really, or engineering industry, in that you have to have a strategy. And 9 times out of 10, this will be to add value to your product offering. And so where you've got a mix of product and service, what's your strategy? How much are you going to lean on the service side, the support that you give to your customers, or how much are you just going to shift boxes and sell the product? It could be an e-commerce site and you're just shifting whatever the attenuators, modems, whatever it is that you've got that you're trying to shift, without sort of slowing it down with too much emphasis on service. You need to have that strategy before you start designing it, and then you will know how much to mix the two up.
Thank you. So I guess talking about site structure, we've got a question from Beverly, and she's in the broadcasting media industry. She's asked, we have an approved site structure, so they've done sort of the initial planning. How should we plan what content goes on each individual page? Or I'm guessing, how to plan each individual page on the website. And I guess I can help with that. The decision of how to plan each page is split to several sort of different subcategories. I guess the first one would be, what's the marketing message of that page? What do you want that page to represent? And when a customer or potential customer reads it for the first time, what message do you want them to read it? And then it goes a bit more sort of specific. So on my field, and is what sort of content will be there, and how would that make this page rank on Google? Because in the end of the day, you want that page to, you want the user to search for this service or product and find you. So you can't just have a page with what you want to convey to the customers, but without them actually being able to find that page. So that's the second sort of aspect. And the third aspect of planning an individual page would be the sort of the structure of it, the user experience, how easy it is to read, how functional is it? Do you want people to follow links on this page to other sections of the website, other services, other products? Do you want them to sign up to a newsletter? Do you want them to fill up an inquiry form? So you need to plan the page in a way that helps your customers reach their final destination or the purpose that you're after by publishing that page.
They're all equally important, really, aren't they?
Yeah, and I guess the idea is that, I guess you could sometimes just focus on the marketing and maybe leave the SEO aside, but be sure that people wouldn't find that page. So that might need to be sort of a landing page that you use advertising to reach people, to bring people to, or it might be coming up from your newsletter. So maybe there wouldn't be a need for a massive emphasis on SEO or search engine optimization. But then if it's a page that is solely focused on search and you just want people to reach it from Google, then maybe you'll compromise on the other aspects and trying to add more content that Google will understand the value of that page. So this is sort of the plan you need to make on each individual page and understand its purpose.
And I think it's true to say that if you've done your planning properly up to this point, then you will know what you are trying to achieve with the page, and therefore it's a kind of a no-brainer. The people who come unstuck tend to do so because they don't really know. There's this tension Gil alludes to between, say, marketing and SEO. You know, do you write the content to get a good impression of your product or service across, or do you write it in order to be attractive to Google? And so there's always this tension going on. And it's very difficult to know the answer because they're both right. If you've done your planning properly up to this point, you know the answer. It's easy. So you just get on and do it.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right. So we've got a few other questions coming up. So we've got Janet from, she works in financial services. She is asking, what is the number one mistake people do when planning their website? So it's quite a general question. I think it's very important. Thank you, Janet.
Shall I answer that?
Ben, you answer the question. No, I'm joking. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, yeah, because I mean this, but it's certainly a weekly occurrence that, you know, clients have, you know, they've got, I hope none of our clients watching, they've got themselves into a muddle. And they've run before they can walk. They've started designing the website before they've been through working out what their objectives are and what the strategy is and what their positioning and what their messages should be. You know, people very quickly and very easily get ahead of themselves, which then means you're having to sort of retrofit functionality or messages or a strategy that wasn't clarified at the outset and justified at the outset, so that the wrong thing was designed. That's the number one mistake that just everyone makes, really. Or not everyone, but so many people make. It's so easy to do. Like I said, you know, if you're a marketing manager, you've probably been, or you know, CEO of a company, you've probably been talking and thinking about your new website for months and months and months, years maybe. So you have this idea in your head that what it's going to be, and of course it's going to be perfect. And so actually going through this planning process it's tiresome because you think, oh, I've done it in my head. I know what need, I need to know. I know what our objectives are. But actually, you have to go through that process again, and you have to do it with the people who are designing the website, the people who are building the website, because if they don't share that vision and that information, then they'll go off and do something else, and you'll be disappointed.
Also, yeah, the people using the website as well. Sorry to cut them off. I think stakeholder inclusion is a big issue, a big mistake. I mean, you're actually planning your website, so there's the first error that you've sidestepped. You are planning it. That's great, but you do need to invite all stakeholders to contribute to the conversation. Just because one or two people have a clear idea about what they think the website should be doesn't add up to a full picture.
Yeah.
I think one thing that people do when they skip the planning stage or the strategic sort of decision-making stage, and they start designing the website, then they find themselves that 2 years after, then the website is irrelevant. And not just because of its content, but also the way that the website is built. It's better to build a website based on the way, on the strategic decisions and how the website is going to sort of live long term, rather than go ahead and just designing something really quickly, and then 2 years later you need to sort of go through the process all over again.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll both save more money and make more money. Simple as that.
So that's what we do, right? So we convince our clients to sit down and think before running.
Well, no one likes planning, do they? But we love it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very difficult
for you.
It's very difficult sometimes, because quite often people will say, can you design a website for me? So we say, well, yes, but what do you want it to, and so we try and bring them back to this planning process, but they don't want to know. They just want to see what it's going to look like. Well, it's going to look great. We know that. It's a hygiene factor, really. But what's it going to include, and what's it going to say about you? That's the difficult thing, and that's what you have to sort out in advance, and that's what planning is all about.
Okay, perfect. So we've got another question here from James. He's in architecture, and he's asking, how do we plan for user experience and user journey relating to the effectiveness of our website? An appropriate question for an architecture. Ben, do you want to maybe answer this?
Yeah, sure. I can say I would expect as an architecture company, you'd be lots of opinion about how the website should look, and rightly so. And many of the architecture websites that I've seen are very visual and experiential. And that's something that probably wants to come into the conversation early as part of the planning. And you're going to have lots of stakeholders internally who have an interest in how that experience works for their prospective customers, whether it's video or interesting use of animations or background imagery, and how that's treated throughout the site. So it's you will get into the visual conversation very quickly. However, planning for user experience really should be done diagrammatically. It should be very much a top level bird's eye view of the website, so you can see the interactions throughout the website. You can establish where the various entry points are for different users. To establish your user experience and user journeys, you need to know who your users are. So you really need to, and where they're coming from. So you really need to begin that process nice and early after you've done your site structure, and think about, as Gil touched on earlier, about the content of those pages, how those pages relate to one another throughout the site, and how those users are likely to travel through how you want them to travel through the site. Can you determine their journey? We often talk about 3 clicks to product as part of web design, especially for e-commerce or for like we talked about earlier, large scale sort of industrial technologies. And we want, so we want our users to be able to reach their intended destination as quickly as possible, but still have the rich experience of using the website.
I think it's true to say that if you've already got a website, and this plan is probably for you then, because you're planning a new website rather than the first one that ever, then you've got all the information you need in your existing analytics. So you can look at the UX that is being delivered and the journeys, the UJs that people are going through on your existing website. And then you can work out what's good and what's bad about that and incorporate that into your new website design. So it's much easier when you're taking an existing website and designing a new one rather than designing a website for a new company or a new product or something like that, new brand, because you've got the analytics there. So your website analytics are really, really important because they will show you what the UX or UJ is at the moment and what the experience that people are getting at the moment is, and you can then build on that. And you've got that information at your fingertips, so worth spending some time studying it. In terms of entry points to the website, that will come through looking at the Google stats. What are people Googling to get to you? And then you can build around that, and you can build landing pages to meet those searches. That's very important as well. And depending on the industry you're in, it's even more important, as anyone who's listened to our other webinars or read my blog will have discovered. Google opens the door for you, so it's really important that you open that door a little chink so Google can find its way in.
Yeah, and also keep the door open, so a lot of people would just ignore the stats of SEO and how people got to their website before, and build a new website, launch it, and then all the old traffic, all the old sort of search terms that people used to get to them are just irrelevant, and people can't find their new website. So there's quite a lot of process in transitioning the content, improving it, but also maintaining what you already had.
Yeah, and this is included in the plan in the earliest of stage. Incidentally, if you want to see the plan again, because we only flashed it up for a minute, didn't we? We'll be making this webinar available on our website, mar-com.net, once we've edited out all the ums and the ers. And so you'll be able to see that there. Alternatively, you could go to our website now and you'll see my most recent blog, which is entitled Website Planning. And the project plan that I showed you is actually from that blog. So you'll be able to see it there. And it's, although I say so myself, it's well worth taking note of that, because we've arrived at that after much head scratching and discussion and debate, and it's been tried and tested in the market umpteen times. And it works.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a question here from Amy. I'm not sure which industry she's working at, but she's asking a question that I think we all want to all ask ourselves. What's to stop me from copying someone else's website and not go through the planning process? So what's to stop, let's say, a restaurant or sort of an architect, for example, going in on the top architect websites in New York, seeing what they've done and just change the colors and keep the structure, keep exactly what they've done and just change the branding?
Well, I don't know, the phrase square pegs and round holes comes to mind, doesn't it? So the likelihood of you finding something that exactly reflects what you're about is very small, and you might well tie yourself in knots trying to fit yourself into that. So that's where the square peg and round hole comes from. Ben, what do you think?
I think it's partly a strategic issue, also relating to specifically market competitiveness. I think that everyone should probably look at their competitors and the people around them, or even go further and seek out websites that they admire, or elements to websites that they admire, that they could see working for themselves. However, how do you determine what will best work for you without having a plan? So, and also doing the research and doing some research into market competitiveness and how, if you do the same thing as your close competitor or something you've seen within your market, then there's a danger you diminish your offer. You have an opportunity really at the outset of creating a new website to address all of these issues with your brand visibility, the messaging that you want to put across, how you're positioned in your market, how you want to be received by your existing and prospective customer base. So if you just take something that's off the shelf effectively and reconstitute it to your ends, you're not really considering all of those really important factors.
Because I guess you can't really have your business can't be exactly like any other business. I think you have your own needs, your own operations, your own sort of benefits that you have over your competitors, and I think that should come up within the structure and the design. So copying it might not always work.
I think also it depends what industry you're in, of course, but one of the things you're always looking to do is to achieve a competitive differentiation. So part of your strategy should be to differentiate yourselves from your competitors so that a prospective customer who's looking around the web for a supplier of a particular product or service, they see your offering as different to the competitor's offering and hopefully better than the competitor's offering for their particular need. Of course, you ain't going to get that if you've just copied somebody else's. Fair enough, Gil. I think you mentioned a restaurant in New York as opposed to your own restaurant in London. Yeah, well, yeah, you could. I mean, it's square pegs and round holes again. Sorry to be broken record about it.
All right. So I think a similar question that we've got here from Emmanuel. He's asking, can you plan for a website to do more than just sell?
Oh, can I answer that again?
Yes, please,
Sorry.
Mark.
Keep on butting in. Of course you can. I mean, the whole point of a website is to do more than just sell. I mean, sure, you've got e-commerce websites that are selling shoes and their job is to sell shoes. But even they go beyond just the sales process because there's so much more to selling than just sticking a picture and a price up and giving them the wherewithal to actually buy it online. And where you're in a more complex marketplace, which is where we're mainly active in business to business, then it becomes much more nuanced and the subtleties of your sale are much more important. In fact, the last webinar, I think it was, we talked about the importance of, in this pandemic world, of coming across as a sort of caring, thoughtful company with a set of values that are appropriate to the world today. So you have to communicate that. No one's going to do business with you if you're just knocking that cheap and nasty, because maybe your shoes have been made by children in Bangalore and you don't want that to happen. So it's all about, the website is all about positioning yourselves and getting across a corporate entity behind the product or service that you're selling, which you want to do business with, you as a customer would want to do business with. So selling, yes, that's the sharp end, but actually to get to the sale, you have to go through a whole positioning exercise that makes you acceptable to the customer.
I'd back that up with what Mark's saying there, and add perhaps that we've seen how much websites have evolved to, they're your brochure, they're your shop window, they're your advert, they're your mission statement, they're your, the window, as Mark said, into the values of your company for your customers. They operate at so many different levels. Some would argue, well, that's all selling, that's all a prelude to a sale. It's a good point to make, but the fact is that, it represents so many different things for your potential customers and people coming in. And I would say that it goes back again to planning. Don't preconceive too much what happens on your page. Make sure you scrutinize it, see it as an opportunity. Don't limit your ambition for a web page if you have a lot more to say or a lot more to offer within the context of the rest of your website.
I think it's professional services where this is particularly true. We do a lot of work in professional services, and there you're talking about more of a partnership than a one-off transactional sale. And if people are going to become your partners or ask you to become their partner, they may not use that terminology, but they want to set up a trading relationship with you, which they probably have to justify to their colleagues and superiors, then they have to feel that you are a company that they would like to be seen to be getting into bed with. And therefore, you have to tick a lot of boxes. And the sale is only one of those boxes.
Okay. So we haven't got long. So I think we've got time for one more question. Mohammed asked, is from IT support industry. He's asked, what is the best way of managing the internal planning process? And I think that's quite an important question, because I think people perhaps see the strategic planning phase as something that take a long time and laborious. And so I don't know, Mark, from your experience, what's sort of the best way of planning your website internally, and how long do you think people should allocate? How much time people should allocate to each part?
Yeah, I think actually that's an interesting question, because there's no right answer to this. And it very much depends on your circumstances. But I would normally encourage the people we deal with, who for the most part are marketing managers, for instance, or digital marketing managers, to have a working group that looks after it internally, so that the responsibility is shared amongst a number of different people. It's partly because the workload will be intense at times, and for a lot of people, they're doing this on top of their day job. But it's partly also because shared responsibility means shared accountability, and the facility to pass things off to people and ensure that things are done on time, and that if they're not done satisfactorily, you can go back to them, and there's a whole checks and a procedure in place that can ensure that you're getting the best out of everyone. So I'd always try and divvy it up between your colleagues, ensure that everybody's on board. We run workshops for a lot of these things. So, if you're doing search term analysis, sit down with an agency like Marcom and go through the analytics, go through the strategy, go through your objectives, and pull out search terms that then the website designer is going to include in the build of the website. But in order to do that, you're not going to do it on your own. You're only going to do that if you've got a support group internally. And have a Gantt chart which shows the critical path and shows all the jobs, and allocate those jobs to individuals or groups within the company, so that everybody knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, when they're doing it by, and that way life becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree. I think in terms of the planning process really informs every step right to the end and beyond launch, or it should do anyway. You should be thinking about what happens after you launch your website as well. And whether you manage that internally or use someone like Marcom, you'd really need to be able to have someone who's in charge, who's steering that right the way through. Teams respond well to knowing what's happening and when, and as long as everyone's clear on what they're contributing to, you should be fine. But it does require a strong plan. Internal teams, if you can, as with SEO and UX and UJ, you could spend £5,000 on it, you could spend £500,000 on it. If you don't have the faculty or the resource or the time internally to run workshops, or you're taking it on all yourself and not wisely taking on support such as Marcom, you really need to be able to make sure that you want a set of well-crafted questions. You take our plan, for instance, break that down into individual pieces. Who does it relate to? Where does their contribution lie? Formulate a set of questions or queries that you can put around the group in charge of planning this website, and formulate your plans and activity from that. But it's all part of a strong planning process.
Yeah, and a final plea from us as an agency who designs and builds websites: allow enough time for it. Everybody's always hugely over optimistic about times, and they say, oh, you can get it done in a month, can't you? We say, well, yeah, we can. If we put all the hours together and we have, say, 3 people working on it, that's a month's work. But actually, there's a huge number of waypoints along the way where there have to be meetings, discussions, decision-making processes have to be gone through. And half of those don't happen when they're supposed to happen because the person you need is off ill or on holiday or just is busy doing other stuff, and we never find out why. So do allow enough time. Don't be over optimistic. Remember, what you're building with a new website is an expression of your company and your values and your products and your services and your people, and everything that is baked into your company is there on your website. It's there for people to see. It's an external expression of an internal entity. And that's a big thing to do. It's not just selling shoes, whatever it is. I mean, if you're selling shoes, yes. But if you're a lawyer, we had a question from an architect, a question from somebody in Satcoms as well, didn't we? These companies are selling complex products requiring complex sales process, normally high value, with big significance, both for the companies who are buying them and for the selling company. So it's more than just a transactional thing.
I think it's implicitly linked with strategy as well, Mark, just to elaborate on what you're saying there, and business objectives. You're sowing the seeds here for the life cycle of your business and the relationships with your audience for the next 5 years. A website should easily be effective and performing for you over that kind of a lifetime. And if it's modernized and well planned. So don't overlook the planning process. This is a key point to your future success.
Yeah, success through planning. Plan, keep on planning, and never let it drop.
And also do.
Okay, well,
right.
I think we've actually gone past our allocated time, haven't we? So sorry about that if we've kept you from the coffee grinder. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you found it useful. If you'd like to discuss any more about what we've been discussing, then please do contact me. You'll find the details all over, but Mark at mar-com.net in case you want to type it in right now. And always happy to answer your questions and discuss in more detail what we've been talking about today. We'll be doing another RC Experts in a month's time. So we'll have information about that up on our website, and we will also be sending you information as long as you're happy to receive it. And we will put the video of today, I think, up on our website in, it probably takes a week or so to sort of snip out all the ums and ers and the bits about me babbling on. And so thank you very much to everybody here.